Good morning, everyone. I'm Rajan Sinha on behalf of Asia Coaching Network. I have the privilege of talking to Mr. Bimal Rath, and I think so many thousand people know Mr. Bimal Rath, so there is no necessity for giving an introduction, but nevertheless, I would just like to say a few lines. And after a brilliant career with great organizations like British Telecom and Nokia, and he ultimately started his own consulting, Think Talent, and he's one of the foremost figures on develop training and development and coaching. We are also privileged to have him on our board of Asia Coaching Network, and I'm grateful that he has kindly agreed to um, satisfy some of my queries and curiosities. And thank you, Mr. Rath.
Thank
And
you, Rajan. Thank you for inviting me, and happy to have a chat. And this is, as you said, this is a little bit of a passion for me, the whole coaching area. So very happy to have a conversation.
yes, yes. Because we are talking about coaching as such, so many things have changed from in the work life and all about people's perceptions about development needs and the best way to go forward and other things. What are the challenges and opportunities you foresee for coaching profession?
I think there are three things we must keep in mind as a backdrop. Okay,
Mm.
so one, that coaching is a very broad word in the sense that you could have coaching in a 10-minute conversation, and then you could have a very formal kind of a coaching engagement for a long period of time with structured sessions. That's one thing to keep in mind, that what definition are we really looking at. That's one. The second aspect to keep in mind is that the last 2 years, while I don't want to talk about COVID per se, but there
Mm.
have been some fundamental shifts in the way people are looking for, quote unquote, reaching out for help. That nature of reaching out for help has changed. People are much more open to talking about issues of which are troubling them, issues of for example, mental health and stuff like that. There is a reach out which is very different from what it was maybe 2 years back or a year and a half back. And the third thing which is to be kept in back of the mind is that coaching as a profession itself, there is a lot more acceptance of the profession, particularly in our part of the world where it has been a bit of a evolution a little bit later than, let's say, the Western world from a structured coaching point of view, right? And coaching in this part of the world also can mean many different things than a very structured coaching agreement. So just to keep that in mind before we get on to the specific challenges and opportunities, right?
Mm.
So let me lay out the opportunities first. Okay, and I'm going to pick one opportunity, big one, and one challenge, and then we can converse further if you have more questions around. In terms of an opportunity, the biggest opportunity I see is the mid-career executive, if I may call it that, or people, let's say, who are 25 to about 35 or 40. And the reason I say this is that these are people who are low on experience in terms of the length of experience, very aspirational, and they can make a difference to the world of the future. Okay, and because there is particularly in this part of the world, because a lot of younger people, a large part of our population is in that. So it's actually a huge energy reservoir which is available, and I see that as a huge opportunity from a coaching perspective, that if we can somehow make a difference to this set of people who can then go on and innovate, take on the world, really change the future of our generation. That to me is the biggest opportunity for coaching.
Mm.
On the challenge side, there's a lot more education to be done. Otherwise, there's the expectations mismatch. There are issues of saying this is what I was looking for, I didn't get it, and so on and so forth. And even a lot of trained coaches, if I may say so, are not always very good at upfront matching those expectations, and therefore you could very often have a situation where uh, it starts off, or at
Mm.
least there's an intent to start off, but because it's not clear as to what it will offer or how will it actually work, it sort of tapers off, if I may call it that. And that gives a little bit of a negative connotation to coaching sometimes as well. So
Mm.
I'd stop there, Rajan, and see if you want to build on those or any other areas you want me to address.
Two questions came in my mind. First, there are three words: coaching, mentoring, and counseling. So sometimes it becomes difficult about what is it and where does one boundary end and the second starts, and or should we even bother about boundaries? That is also a related question. The second thing is wherever there is a huge opportunity, a lot number of people rush in, including the trainers, and you talked about that issue. How do you find coach training programs for L&D needs? The any observation?
See, I think coach training programs are doing well because we are a country of certifications. Okay, so I
Mm,
think people like to be certified. Then often, of course, buyers in corporations are also looking for some kind of a certification. My view
mm,
is that certification does prepare you a little bit. If it is a good certification, it does give you a primer. But,
mm,
and I'm using the but as a very large capital but, to become a
mm,
good coach or to be able to actually deliver to a client or to a corporation, I think there are three things required. So there is a process,
mm.
and tools and other things go with it. There is the orientation of the individual, and then of course how do you use the tools? Okay, because at the end of the day, one of the analogies somebody gave me, you can give somebody a great kitchen with all the ingredients in there, it doesn't make a good cook. Okay,
Yeah.
and to me that is the issue. Coaching certifications, while they are building a primer, and I think they're doing a good job in terms of educating people to some degree and getting familiarity, but I am not sure what quality of cooks are they really producing. Okay, that's how I would like to put it. Yeah, does
Mm.
that address that question? And it's a controversial thing, I know, but let me say that anyway.
Yeah. Thank you for this. I also wanted to know, when you talked about these issues, quite often uh, organizations, when they ask for coaches, they are also keeping in mind mentoring rather than coaching. And though they may call that coaching, but where is the boundary?
Yeah, actually, you asked that earlier, and I missed it out. So I think when you are engaging with a person, and if you are going in with a core that you need to help the person, if that is the primary core, I don't think we should get into the technical boundaries too much of coaching and mentoring and advising and counseling. Okay, having said that, okay,
Mm, mm,
this is from the point of view of the person who is delivering that. For example, if you're having a session with somebody, you don't really want to say, no, I will not talk to you because you are expecting this advice, and there's a skill involved in how do you do that. Having
mm,
said that, expectations should be very, very clearly set right up front, and that to me is the key. That if an organization is looking for a advisor, a coach, or a mentor, or a consultant, or a teacher, that needs to be spelled out up front. You can so I don't want to get into the semantics, but the
mm,
expectation should be very clearly laid out. That what do you expect out of the relationship, and how is it structured, what will it actually deliver, how will it be measured, and so on and so forth. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is that if a person goes in with a very clear understanding, whether it's an individual or a corporation or a buyer saying that we are looking for coaching, it is the role of the coach or the organization which is providing coaching to be able to educate the buyer or the user of the coaching, saying, when you are saying you are going to quote unquote use a coach or buy coaching, this is
mm.
what you're going to get. So educating and setting the boundaries, I think, is something all coaches need to learn really well, or anybody who's actually selling coaching.
What shift, if any, you have witnessed in the C-level coaching, both from the client and coach perspectives in the recent times?
From a user side, two things have happened. I think people are, particularly at the C level, people are willing to engage a little bit more in terms of listening to what actually is coaching. I think there's a lot more education now than, let's say, 3 years back. Okay, so people are willing to, even if they come with an early requirement saying this is what I want, I
Mm,
think they are looking for some degree of advice and are willing to listen, saying, okay, if you are an expert and you're telling me this, then maybe this is what we should do, kind of a thing, right? So there is a lot more openness in that engagement rather than saying, okay, this is what I need, and if you can offer it, then fine or not. So that's one.
good.
I think the second is that uh, it is no more a HR activity. Earlier, the typical process would be, and I'm specifically talking about C-suite. I think now the CEO or the COO or business head or even the boards in many cases get involved in terms of actually spelling out the requirement and quote unquote choosing a coach, if you will, right? So I think that is bringing a lot more seriousness and clarity to the process, and that's a very good evolution which I see happening over the last 2 3 years. It's a little slow, but it's certainly happening, kind of a thing, right? On the
Mm,
other side, I think on the coach side, at least the more seasoned and experienced coaches, I
mm,
think they are also learning to say no much more. So they are realizing that if there's an expectation mismatch or what the client is looking for is not really coaching, or I think a lot of them are willing to today walk away and say that this is not really what I can help with, or what is coaching, or what. And I think that's a good thing, but I'm saying it very categorically that this is possibly for the more seasoned and experienced coaches who've been there, done that for a while now. Okay. The other thing which is happening, and which you alluded to in a different way, and I alluded to in a different way, there is a plethora of coaches. Okay,
mm,
unfortunately, there are a lot of certified people now.
mm,
Many people who've been ex executives automatically think that they can become good coaches,
mm,
rightly or wrongly. I'm not
mm,
commenting, because each individual could be very different, and some will become very good coaches, some will not. But the challenge then is that there is a corruption in the market happening, because many of these people don't necessarily have the orientation or the skills to become a coach. They could be a
mm,
great mentor, they could be a great teacher, they could be a great functional consultant. So what is happening is that on one side, the buyer is becoming a little more evolved, but on
mm.
the other side, the seller is actually corrupting the market and going possibly in the opposite direction in some ways. That's how I would see it. Yeah,
Yeah, what we call coaching mindset.
correct.
That is one thing which is not necessarily there if you have been in the industry for 30, 40 years. So that requires a different mind shift. Uh, you are actively involved with Asia Coaching Network. In what ways do you think that ACN can contribute to the profession?
I think, see, some of the things you're already doing, in terms of educating, maybe a lot more education is required of both the buying side, I would say. See, I think if you look at the market and you look at it from a very economic perspective, the seller, product, and service will change if the buyer becomes more discerning. Okay.
Mm,
My view is that, if ACN could focus on educating corporations, buyers, and users of coaching much more, because see, once the economic pull is of that kind, saying that this is what we are looking for, it will automatically mean that people who are practicing coaching or are offering coaching services, etc., will fall in line the with the demand of the buyers. That's one. I
mm,
think the other thing which I see ACN started with, and I think this is something we are pursuing. There are a lot of institutional bodies, whether they are NGOs or whether there are government bodies, non-profit organizations, etc., who cannot afford a coach of the very traditional kind, who's charging money and of a fairly high order, particularly at the senior levels.
mm,
These
mm,
are institutions and corporations or bodies which actually can be hugely benefited by coaching, you know
mm,
particularly at the senior levels, because these are, they are in a way the drivers of change in society. Many NGOs, NPOs, government bodies, on ground kind of change makers, if you will. And I think
mm.
ACN can play a very critical role in helping them creating a model where that particular community can be serviced, because my view is that the bulk of the quote unquote executive coaches, for them it's a business, it's a commercial model, and therefore for them the target audience is people who can quote unquote pay. Okay. And I think we need to look at other parts of the ecosystem, where where large transformation work is happening, and I think ACN can play a very significant role in helping coaching those kind of people, who are really doing on ground significant work in the society.
Thank you. Thank you. Related to this, when we talked about executive coaching and business coaching and other things, now there are a lot of other disciplines which are coming up, and everybody who is in a position to offer any kind of service has started labeling himself or herself as a coach. So, I don't know whether there is a need or for standardization there also, or how do you look at the entire scene?
The more the market can expand, the
Mm.
better off it is, because it doesn't really matter. If there's a buyer for a wellness coach, there's a buyer for a career coach, there's a buyer for a performance coach, as long as it is helping the individual. What I worry about is that, is it actually helping, or is it just a commercial business model which is not really useful? I think, to me, that would be the test, rather than worrying too much about semantics, to be honest, if you ask me.
Yes, actually, it's not. I agree with you. Only thing is that undifferentiated offering sometimes spoil the name of the profession, and it is not new. For example, there are many words which started as a well-meaning thing. For example, there was a word neta or leader.
Right.
So neta was something that was somebody who was to be respected. Now, Neta has got so much corrupted that you call somebody Neta and it means something else.
Hmm.
Or, for example, Sadhu.
Right. Right.
So, similarly, only thing is that, of course, one can have debate about it, but my concern was that it should not go to the level where it becomes an object of derision, that you say
Hmm.
coach and people say, ah, this, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
No,
is
no,
the.
Rajan, I see your point, and I am a very strong proponent of the fact that,
Yeah.
uh, the right people should be doing the right things. Let me put it this way. Okay.
Yeah.
But I would say that, because it's an economic model, I think the buyer will sift through, and say that, I am looking for this kind. What I would actually advocate, more than the nomenclature or standardization of this thing, is kind of evolution of a standard which actually
Hmm.
defines who is a coach. Whether you do coaching in a particular area or not. Today, see, any certification, you do a 2-day certification, you do a 5-day certification, you are trained for 20 years, you're trained for 1 day. There is no barrier to who can call themselves a coach. So I would say that if there is a standards kind of a mechanism, that who actually can say that I am a coach, or on what basis will you define a coach, I think that's a far better uh, you know uh, way to perhaps improve the overall quality, and, like you're rightly saying, not give a bad name to the profession.
Yeah.
Certainly, but I think standards are required. I agree with you.
So thank you very much for your time, and it is a great sharing. And I hope that our listeners also will be greatly benefited by your views. Thank you so much.
Hello, thanks, Rajan. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the kind words. This has been a thoroughly enjoyable conversation for me.
Thank you. Thank you.